Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co., and this is a list, in a manner of speaking. I don't really know what the title of this video is going to be. I haven't quite figured it out because it's like 15 board game answers. It's a list in a manner of speaking, but a very customized list. Meaning, more specifically, I've seen recently going around in the various Facebook groups, the social media, a list of 12 questions around different things around games. Different fun little things, you know, your favorite game, your least favorite game, the game that got you in the hobby, a whole bunch of different questions, and then you can go through one at a time with the various answers. I liked the idea of that, and I was going to go ahead and just fill out my own, and then I was like, well, this is actually a good idea for a video, so I decided I'll do a video instead, talking about this. And so, here are 15 questions. 15 questions, each that gets answered with a board game, and I'll go through each of them. If you noticed that I said 12 before and 15 now, it's because I added 3 onto it, because I like round numbers. That's why. So we have 15 different questions being answered. I highly encourage you in the comments down below, list your own versions of these answers, and at the end of this video I'll also be nominating 3 other board game YouTubers to answer them themselves. They don't know it's coming, they don't have to do anything, but it's fun, so why not? So, let's go ahead and start this off. Timestamps as usual down below, and starting off the bat, the first 2 are a little more negative, and then there's one more a little bit later, but then most of these are just more interesting conversations around what spots in your life different board games fit into. Starting off with the first one, the board game I don't like. Now, some of these questions are inherently subjective. Well, they're all subjective, but some of them are different in the sense that there's plenty of games I don't like. What is the one that's going to come to mind for me? And so, for myself, I chose a recent letdown. I tried finding a game that is a board game I don't like, a board game that I would not want to spend the time playing again. There's not a lot of those. There's many games that are okay, but a game that I actually do not like and would not want to give that game the amount of time it takes to play again. For my first pick, I'm choosing Dominant Species. And it's a very controversial pick in the sense that this is a very popular game. It's like number 77 on Board Game Geek. It's in the Board Game Geek Top 100 because, you know, 77. Well loved, well rated, phenomenal game with a long legacy of just, it's been out since a while, 2012 maybe, earlier, I don't know exactly when, earlier than 2012. It's been around for a while, put it that way. And it's a well-loved game. And they came out recently with Dominant Species Marine, which I may or may not try. And it's not that this is a bad game. It's that it didn't work for me, and it's like 3.5 hours. And I have multiple complaints. I go into it in a whole different video. I'm not heavily going to do that right now. What I will say is there are a bunch of reasons why I simultaneously can understand why many people like this game, but for me, it wasn't for me. It's a game that there are aspects of it that appeal to me, but then there's a lot of maintenance, a lot of bookkeeping, a lot of take that, a lot of things that can mess with others. It's the kind of game that I think if I played this 3 or 4 more times, I'd probably really appreciate it. But that would also be 12 hours of my life to get to a point where I appreciate it, and I don't know if I would appreciate it or not. It might just not be for me. The combination of the long game time, the heavy spot is taking, the fact that this would be taking up a game night, a full game night of a game I could love, or do love, Dominant Species is the game that I don't like, at least for this video. Next up is another one, which is the board game I think is overhyped. Now, this one I tried looking for a specific aspect, meaning when it comes to overhyped, it's a hard conversation around what does that even mean, because for me, most of the time, if I go through the popular games, most of the time, I either like it myself, or alternatively, I don't like it as much myself. I mean, I'm okay with it, but I don't love it, and I think it's overhyped. But even then, there's this weird concept of what does it mean to be overhyped? And so for me, personally, if a game has a certain degree of accessibility to it, I can understand why many like it. If it has a degree of cleverness or heaviness and complexity, I can understand why people like it. Dominant Species is a great example. I don't think this is overhyped. I think it's not for me. There's a difference. But I kept going through hundreds and hundreds of games trying to find a game that I could say that is overrated, is overhyped. And I don't know if I could, really. And so I went with the second best thing, which is I went with a game that people love, and it's a game that really didn't work for me, but I understand why it worked for others. But I don't get the love myself. I can see the components that make up a great game, but the fact that it's top 100, that to me is a little surprising, and it's not going to be the game I pick up. I just don't have the game that I want to pick up. It's going to be Raiders of the North Sea, meaning Architects I actually like more than Raiders, so I'm giving Raiders, because Raiders to me, Raiders of the North Sea is a game that I tried. This is part of the same series and concept, so that's why I have this here. But Raiders of the North Sea is a game that I have played I played Raiders like 3 or 4 times. I played Raiders of Scythia once. Kept trying to love the game, and for me, I'm okay with it. It's not a bad game. If you sat down and said, Alex, I want to play this game with you, I'd probably play it. It's a short enough game, it's accessible enough, there's enough fun things going on that are fine, but I don't get why it has the love that it has. To me, it's a little simpler than what I'm looking for. It doesn't have something. There's no magic to it. It's just fine. Like, if I would for me, it's a 3.5 out of 5. It's fine, and yet it's top 100. People love it, and I don't get why. Even though I like Dominant Species less, I understand more why it would be a well-loved experience by those who are willing to dive into it. My number 3, and this is where we start spinning more towards positive. Number 3 is the most underappreciated game. The underappreciated game, the thing that you see, that you appreciate, that others don't. And for me, I actually did a full video on this subject, a full video on my top 10 underrated games, and the number 1 spot is going to be the one that's over here, which is, it's heavy, Carson City. Carson City is a well-liked game, to be very clear. It's a 7.2 on Board Game Geek, if I recall correctly. But to me, this is a 5 out of 5. To me, this is a fantastic game. Absolutely fantastic. The nuance, the complexity, the in-your-face worker placement aspect of it, but the in-your-face in a way that is not so punishing. I think Carson City is fantastic. Like, absolutely fantastic. I believe they have another version coming back to Kickstarter at some point, in some way, shape, or form. But I love this game. I think the deluxe box only adds to how much I love it, because the components are amazing, the expansion content, all the stuff. But Carson City, I mean, I am always happy to sit down for a nice, long, in-your-face worker placement with a little bit of aggression mixed in, with a variety of expansion content. I think this is fantastic. Like, not good, I think it's fantastic. And it's just good by the generally accepted standards of the board game world. And for me, I mean, it's fantastic. It just is. It's like an incredible game. It's underappreciated, at least as far as I'm concerned. Number 4 is the board game you love. The board game I love. And this one was a tough one only because my instinctive answer is, well, let's go with my number 1 game of all time, Terraforming Mars. But again, that felt boring, and I mean, I could do that, but I wanted to go, in this case, with, similar to the way I picked Dominant Species, because it's more recent as far as, I think it's one of the most recent games that I would not want to play again. For the game that I love, I went with the most recent game that has sparked those, I love this game, and I knew I loved this game. I knew it. Like, the first time I played this game was my top 10 of all time. Not the first year I played this game, it made its way into my top 10 of all time. But then it kind of slipped a bit over time. Still doing phenomenally well, still always in the top 20, but it never made its way back to the top 10 properly. But I think it's going to be back in the top 10 this next coming year, I think. It's always hard to say, because it's easy to think of something as top 10, but then it has to push something else out, and that something else was also top 10, so I don't really know what's going to ultimately happen. But for me, the game that I love currently, I got 2 plays in this past week, and oh my gosh, it's amazing, is Rurik Dawn of Kiev. Rurik Dawn of Kiev by Stanislav Kazansky is an amazing game of area control, of action programming. I think it's probably the terminology it's called. It's action programming in the sense that the game is divided into 4 rounds, and each round has 2 phases. There's the phase of placing down your advisors to lock in the actions you're going to take, and that has a degree of locking in the strength of the action and the timing of the action, and then you go to resolving your actual actions that you locked in the first half. It's so good. The tension of trying to figure out the way you're going to lock in your actions. And it's actually interesting, because Dominant Species has a similar action programming mechanic where you lock in your actions and then resolve them, and yet Dominant Species I don't love, and Rurik Dawn of Kiev I think is one of the best things that has ever hit the board game world. I don't think enough people have gotten their hands on this game. A lot of people who've played this game love it, and a lot of people haven't tried it. And I only tried it on a fluke, by the way. In fact, technically this should be eligible for another one down this list, which is the game that surprised you. I only ever tried Rurik Dawn of Kiev because of the fact that I was trading games with somebody, and they wanted another game from me, and they were like, hey, what about I give you Rurik and you take that? And I was like, sure, I guess I'll do that. Like, I didn't want the other one. Rurik seemed like interesting-ish. And then it sat on my shelf unplayed for months before I eventually sat down one day and played it and was blown away. Like, straight up blown away. And I got 2 plays in this past week because I played it with my group, and we were like, we haven't played this in like 6 months, and whoa, it's so good. I don't know why we haven't played it in 6 months. And so we sat down like 2 days later and played it again. And I can bet that we're gonna continue to sit down and continue to play it. Rurik Dawn of Kiev, I have to imagine it's making its way into my top 10 this next year. But again, I don't know because something else would have to be pushed out. That's always the balance. You can only fit 10 games into your top 10, although sometimes I try to fit more into those numbers. In any case, that's my number 4, the board game I love. The board game I can play over and over and over again. Okay, so this is a tougher one because there's a lot of games that I could play over and over and over again, but I decided to go with one that I do play over and over again. Rather than thinking in the theoretical, I went with the actual. The game that consistently hits my table on a regular basis is Cockroach Poker. This is an ongoing finisher for the night. It's an ongoing, every single time we hit the end of the night, our game group is done playing Rurik Dawn of Kiev, and we don't have another hour. We have another 20 minutes. We pull out Cockroach Poker and we play it. We know it's good, we know it does the job, we know it's a blast, and then inevitably we end up playing it for an hour anyway as we go through round after round after round, and we haven't gotten bored of it. I don't know why. It could well be biased by the fact that this is regularly, for us, a late night game. This is regularly, it's 1 in the morning, and we just want to get another game before we go, and so we're drunk tired, if it were. Not actual drunk, but drunk tired, where it's late, the night's been long, we've played a lot of games, and then we sit down to start playing a bluffing game of you have a rat, I have a bat, you have this, you have that, and it's just hilariously fun every time we play it. And it still is fun every time we play it. The thing that gets me, the thing that surprises me every time, is I understand why I like this game. I do. That's not my question at all. I just don't understand how we keep playing it. This is likely the most played game in my collection, or possibly... I'm trying to think what else would hit that. One Night Ultimate Werewolf, we went through a long time where we played that, but One Night Ultimate Werewolf has definitely seen a drop-off over the course of, well, COVID and pandemic and our group shrinking. And so Cockroach Poker, specifically the Royal version, this is likely the most played game in my collection, if not the most, in the top 3 or 4. We play this all the time. I don't think a month goes by where we're not playing this multiple times. It works. It just works. Cockroach Poker is the game, not that I can play over and over again, but the game that I do play over and over again. Which brings me to my next one, which is where we start moving into the realm of the theoretical. The board game I should play more often. The board game I should play more often. Now for this one, I did narrow it down to, not narrow it down, I had a few potential options. Everdell is a great candidate for this one because Everdell is a game that I love and I want to play more, but I ultimately decided to go with a solo game for a variety of reasons. First of all is because there are several solo games that I think I should be playing more often, but also because I don't even have the excuse of, well, our game group and people, and we have these other games and I have to balance their priorities and my priorities. The solo games are where I really should be playing them more often. I don't have an excuse. I just need myself. I don't need other people. So I can't say, well, yeah, but when we meet, they want to play this. I don't have that option on the table. With Everdell, I can give you 15 reasons why I don't play it, and they all come down to blaming other people. And, I mean, granted, you could play it solo, but I'd prefer it as a multiplayer game. And so I narrowed this down ultimately to 2 games. And I chose the one I did because the other one's going to show up later on this list. And the one I chose is Marvel Champions. Marvel Champions is the game that I should be playing more often. Marvel Champions is a fantastic game, a fantastic solo experience, and yes, you could play it with 2 people or more, and I have played it with more than, well, me, but it's one that I'm picking because I could play it with just me, and I have enough content that there's no reason why I either should have less content for the game, or I should be playing this more, and so I'm going to say that I should be playing this more. Now, to be fair, I happened to pull it out and play it today. Like, today, I pulled it out and played it, but I pull it out maybe once every 2 months and get a game in, which is not enough for the game it is, particularly because it's not a long game. If you're in the Marvel Champions mode, if you have that, like, if you don't have to look up rules and you know what's going on and you've been playing it recently, you can knock out a game of this, including building an entirely new deck, I want to say in 45 minutes, tops an hour. And the tops an hour is really if you spend that extra time deck building. I have it set up that my decks are always deconstructed and reconstructed in between plays. I don't hold on to a deck. I sit there and I say, I'm playing with, Scarlet Widow and Scarlet Witch. Not Scarlet Widow. I'm playing with Scarlet Witch and I'm facing off against Ultron, and I'm going to go with a bit of a leadership deck this time. And then boom, I spend 10 minutes constructing a deck, thinking through, I want to combine this and that and those things. I want to control multiple allies, have a few Avenger allies, throw in a few Avengers upgrades. I try to heavily lean into some strengths and weaknesses and whatnot. Well, not weaknesses. And then face off against the particular villain with their deck that I construct, always throwing in some expert cards, throwing in the standard deck, picking a scheme or whatever, to side, not scheme, whatever they're called, the other decks that you throw in there, and then mixing it up. 10 minutes later, I'm ready to go, and then the game takes 30-40 minutes. And then I deconstruct everything. I'm done in an hour. Between construction, between teardown, between playing, I'm done in an hour. I should be playing this game every week. I love it. It's fantastic. It's a 5 out of 5 for me. I enjoy Marvel Champions so much. So why am I only playing it every 2 months? I mean, I can give lazy answers like I'm busy and I'm always doing stuff, but those just sound like excuses to me. Number 7. Number 7 is the board game that got me into the hobby. Now this is almost a two-part answer because there's really a combination of two games. Not Catan. Catan I played for years, but it didn't get me into the hobby. It laid the groundwork, so to speak. The game that got me into the hobby, I'm going to say, is Small World. You see, I had played Stone Age at one point in 2011 or 2012. I don't remember the exact timeline, but somewhere around there I played Stone Age. And I thought it was fantastic. I thought it was great. I really enjoyed it. And then a few months later, I played Small World. And introduced to me by my brother-in-law. The same person introduced both these games to me, and I played Stone Age, and I played Small World. And when I played Small World, I was like, I played Carcassonne, I played Catan, I played a few games that I've been playing for years, and then I played Stone Age, which was amazing, and then like 3 months later I played Small World. What is this thing here that's going on, that there are these other games that are cool, and awesome, and amazing? And so it's the 1-2 tap across a 3 or 4 month period of Stone Age, then Small World, 2 games I had never heard of, 2 games I had never played, but that really impressed me, that led to me diving deeply into the hobby. So it's that 1-2 tap. So those two games I don't have on the table because while they're both fantastic games, I don't own them in my collection anymore. Number 8, the board game that changed my life. Now this is dramatic. Like, this is really dramatic. The board game that changed my life is an extreme statement. Like, what does it take for a board game to change your life? It can't be the game that got you into the hobby. I mean, that definitely changed my life, but we just covered that question, right? So it's not the board game that got you into the hobby. Like, what is it? The board game you played with the person you went on a first date on and you played a game with them and then you married them? I mean, it's a great little story, but it didn't happen to me. I only really got into the hobby after the fact. I don't think I played a lot of board games with my wife while I was dating. Maybe a few. There were some games. There was Corridor. I think it was like Corridor's only game. I had this like terrible game I played when I was dating back in the days, with like a get to know you kind of game, one of those cranium games where you ask questions or learn about the other person. But I don't know what to really answer as far as the board game that changed your life. So what I will pick, or what I did pick, is a game that changed my life in a manner of speaking. Specifically, it's the game that got me into solo gaming, which is specifically, if I can find it over here, specifically Spirit Island is the game that got me into solo gaming. And I guess arguably that changed my life. It certainly opened up a direction of this hobby that I otherwise didn't engage in. You see, when I played board games, I tried a few solo games from time to time, here and there. I tried Friday, I tried Space Hulk Death Angel. I thought they were okay, but I didn't love either of them. By the way, for the record, Friday is fantastic and I love it, but I didn't love it back then. I thought they were interesting, I thought they were intriguing, and I tried a few other solo games here and there, and just none of them worked for me. They were all little puzzly games, and I just wrote off solo gaming as that thing that other people do. But I loved Spirit Island. I loved it. I got the game, and then like maybe 4 or 5 months after having it, I wanted to play it one night, and my wife didn't. And I was like, you know what? This game does play solo. Why don't I pull it out and give it a shot? And I did. And I loved it. I had such a good time with the experience. It was an incredible game to play. And I was like, oh my gosh, I've been writing off solo games as not ideal experiences when I just wasn't playing the right ones. For the most part, my experience with the solo games was small little puzzles, not deep and inviting worlds of gaming. And this is the one where, after playing this, I started looking things up again. I tried Friday again at a later point, got it back in my collection. I tried Space Hulk Death Angel again, found it too luck dependent, at least for me, and didn't love it still. But I started diving into the world of solo gaming because of Spirit Island. So, again, changing my life seems a bit dramatic. I tried thinking of other instances of a board game that changed my life. I got nothing for right now, but I do have this one, which got me into solo gaming, which certainly is a huge pivot in the direction of games I play, of approaches I take, of what I can review, of what I can cover. Solo gaming is a whole new aspect, and I love solo gaming. I play solo games a lot. I played 3 solo games today. Just today, I played 3 solo games. I never used to do that. I used to read rulebooks and play games with other people. I never dove into games solo. It's not my default mode of gaming. But solo gaming probably takes up around 25% of my plays at this point, which is not an insignificant number of my plays. I play a lot of games. That's a whole lot of solo gaming going on. And so that's my number 8, the board game that changed my life. My number 9 is the game that surprised me the most. The game that surprised me the most in terms of I was expecting nothing and I got a whole lot. Now, Rurik can arguably be that, But I wouldn't pick Rurik for two reasons. One is I didn't think of it until this video when I was in the middle of talking about how Rurik came out of the blue. And two is because it's not that Rurik surprised me the most. Let me rephrase that. Rurik did surprise me. But I think a game that surprises you more than going from 0 to 100 is a game that went from negative to 100. And that's why I'm picking Ghosts of Christmas for the game that surprised me the most. You see, Ghosts of Christmas was a write-off to me. I got this game because I was getting the Board Game Tables bundle of games. And once you were getting 2 of them, you may as well get all 3. And so I grabbed Ghosts of Christmas thinking, hey, I'll give it a shot. But ultimately, it's trick-taking. Trick-taking is a genre that I historically have not liked and does not work for me. My game plan was to get Ghosts of Christmas, to play it, and then get rid of it. I was just like, okay, and I was only getting it because it made sense once you're getting 2 out of the 3 games. And so it was basically like a negative expectation. I'll get this, I'll play it, I'll move on, and I'll play better games. I will waste 10 minutes on this game and no more. I've wasted a lot more on this game because it's fantastic. Ghosts of Christmas is potentially my favorite trick-taking game. I think it is. I think it is my favorite trick-taking. You see, the crew Mission Deep Sea has been the trick-taking game that kind of eluded my hate of trick-taking, but I thought that's because it was cooperative. I was like, all the things I don't like about trick-taking, they work for me when I'm playing a cooperative experience. Turns out there's other reasons. It's just, it depends on the trick-taking game in question, and the Ghost of Christmas is absolutely amazing. It really works for me. It involves playing tricks into 3 different lanes, the past, the present, and the future, or the beyond as well if you have the little expansion there. And just has this aspect of trying to think on 3 or 4 planes of existence as you go through the trick-taking, and as you try to think through how you can mess with people, how you can open up your own tricks, how you can get a few things in, where the trump cards are, tracking the tricks. So much fun going on in this game. The Ghost of Christmas is a game that I expected negative expectation from, and absolutely blew me away. My number 10, the Guilty Pleasure game. The Guilty Pleasure. Number 10 is the Guilty Pleasure board game. I had a few options I could pick for this one. Ultimately, I chose, I'm starting to lean down heavily, there's only so much space I have on the floor here, Valeria Card Kingdoms. Valeria Card Kingdoms is my Guilty Pleasure game. This is a game that I adore it. I think it's a lot of fun, and I am always happy to sit down and play it. It basically involves building up your tableau of citizens as you roll dice and everyone gets things on their turn. Think Space Base, think Catan, think Machikoro, think all of that, but with the art of the Micho, and in a game that is just a lot of fun. I say Guilty Pleasure because it's light, very light. It's a lot of fun to just roll dice and gather resources. I don't know how strategic the game is. I don't know. I think there's a certain level of cognizance of just some basic math and what's going to pay off versus what's not. But then past that, it basically just comes down to rolling dice and getting resources. But I like it. It's a lot of fun, and it has worked for me in ways that other games haven't. Machikoro I think is fine. Space Base I think is fine. And I think Space Base is well loved by many, but I'm fine with Space Base. Catan is a lot more than fine, but also more work, so the payoff has to be larger too. I love Valeria Card Kingdoms. And the expansions also are messy and or fun depending on what you're doing. I'm fine playing with or without the expansions, but this is definitely my Guilty Pleasure game. This is definitely the game that is just... It's just fun. I don't know if I can call it good, but I really enjoy myself when I'm playing this one. My number 11, and from these next 5, 3 of them I don't have, which we'll get to and why and how and what, but my number 11 is the board game that I should have already played, but have not yet done so. Now, first of all, there's 50 games I could have picked for this one, but the one I picked is the one that I've read the full rulebook for, at the beginning of COVID and the pandemic when I thought we were going to be playing games again shortly, and then we didn't. But I read the full rulebook. I was ready to dive in. I could play it solo, but I was like, I don't want to get a leg up on other people. It's a heavy game. I want us all to be walking on the same ignorant level playing field. And it's Anachrony. Anachrony from Mind Clash Games. I haven't played a Mind Clash game yet because Anachrony is the one I'm supposed to be playing first, and I have not had a chance to dive into it yet. I'm really excited to dive into Anachrony. I want to play it, but it's been in my collection for 3 years at this point, and I still haven't played it, and I have all these other Mind Clash games like Tricarion or whatever, Cerebria, or their most recent Perseverance, all those other games, I want to get my hands on them, but I refuse to get them until I try and play Anachrony and see how it holds up. It's supposed to be a fantastic game of borrowing resources from your past self to bring to the present. It's supposed to be a very fun experience, and one that I'm very much looking forward to, but I just haven't played it yet. I really, really should be playing it. Which brings me to my number 12. The board game that I'm the most excited for. Now this one's going to be a boring answer because I'm sure it's a lot of people's answer right now, but for me it's Ark Nova. Ark Nova, a 10 out of 10 from Tom Vassell from the Dice Tower, a game that has been hyped by well more than just him. Jeremy Howard absolutely adores it. Board Game Ramblings, I believe they loved it if I'm not mistaken. A lot of people have absolutely loved Ark Nova. And I was sitting here not getting a pre-order copy when it first came out because I was like, I got plenty of unplayed games. I don't need to buy into the hype. I'm already bad enough with Kickstarters as it is. But now I regret my decision to not be all hyped up. And so I have it on pre-order now, but pre-order now is a little too late. But Ark Nova is supposed to be appealing to the same types of people that like Terraforming Mars, which is me right over here. I love Terraforming Mars, and Ark Nova definitely appeals to me. And I really want to play it. I just don't have a copy yet. And so I'm very excited for Ark Nova, eager to dive into it. And we'll see. That's the board game I'm most excited for. And then these last 3 questions I added on myself. The first 12 were all questions that already existed. And these last 3 are ones that I specifically added for a variety of reasons. But the first one is the hot game, the popular, hyped up game that you have no interest in trying. Okay? So it's a game you haven't played, but it's the hot game you have no interest in trying. And for me, it's Oath. Now, Oath is relatively hot, depending on where you are. The main hotness has slowly dived down a bit. Not like a lot. It's still well sought after. But Oath is a game from Leader Games that, when I first heard of the concept, I was intrigued-ish, but I didn't back the Kickstarter. Something about it just didn't pull me in enough. And then when it landed, reviews were mixed. Now, not in a bad way, but like mixed in a way that like there's a lot of people who love the game, and a lot of people who are only okay at best with it. And so, whenever you have a game with that wide spectrum of opinion, the question is, where would I lie? Where would I fall? But then you combine that with the fact that it's a game that's meant to be played with the same group again and again and again. It's not supposed to be a one-shot adventure, and it puts it in the territory of campaign games that I tend to not play as it is. It's not that I think Oath is a bad game, it's that I just don't know if it will or won't be for me, and the commitment it's asking from me in order to find out if it's for me is just way more than I'm willing to give that game based on my limited interest in it. Could it be amazing? Absolutely. Is it generally well rated and very hyped? Well, yes, that's why it's in this category. But for me, I just don't have an interest in Oath. It's a lot of people excited, and I'm not one of them. Number 14. And this is this is a question I came up with when I was thinking through board games that changed your life. But this isn't a game that changed your life, but this is the fondest memory I have playing a board game. So what's the fondest memory you have playing a board game, or more specifically the board game in that memory? And for me, that's Codenames Duet. Codenames Duet is easily my fondest memory playing a board game that I can think of. And it's the birth of our last child, our last son, Rafiki. His name's Rafi, but I like to call him Rafiki because he was born the same day as the Lion King movie came out. But Rafiki was born in the hospital, and my wife and I, over the weekend, sat down and we played a bunch of games, but one of the games we sat there and played a lot was Codenames Duet. We just, in the hospital, we just had our last kid, and we just sat there and played, 10 games of Codenames Duet. And she came up with a whole bunch of clues. One of the clues that the only clue we particularly remember from all these sessions is she gave me Stake 2. Okay, Stake 2. It's not a very ambitious clue, but it was a good clue because I rotated Cow, and then I rotated Joan of Arc for Stake 2. And for context, I was right on those two. It was Cow and Joan of Arc. And I thought it was such a clever connection, but I don't know. Something about just being in the hospital, the last time we were in the hospital with a baby, and playing Codenames Duet. It's not the only time we played board games in the hospital. We generally have whenever we've had kids. We're kind of stuck there. We both like games. And so we usually bring a bunch of small pocket games. That particular trip, we played Crusade. We played the TMG's Crusaders? No, the Crusade, what's it called again? It's not called Crusaders, is it? Whatever it is, you know what I'm talking about. The Crusade one from TMG. We played Codenames Duet. We played a few other games. I don't remember them all. But Codenames Duet we love. And so that's my fondest memory playing a board game. Number 15... and this is just because I'm a Kickstarter channel and I felt I had to have this question in there, which is what is the favorite Kickstarter game? What is the favorite Kickstarter game you have from all those you've backed? From all the Kickstarter games you've backed, what is your favorite? And for me, I'm going to have to bend down again. It's all the way on the floor here. Sorry. For me, it's Vindication. Vindication, from all the games that I backed on Kickstarter, this is my favorite Kickstarter game, at least as of right now. And this is literally just going through my top 100 games of all time and working my way down them. And it's not my favorite game that also has a Kickstarter version that I backed, or else Blood Rage or Terraforming Mars or other things could potentially be higher. But for me, this is the highest ranked Kickstarter game in my top 100 from those that I actually backed it on Kickstarter. I think Vindication is fantastic. I think it's absolutely amazing. It was my number 10 the first year I played it, which was I played it at the beginning of the year in 2020, I think it was, and then in 2020's list towards the end of the year, I put it as my number 10 of all time. Over the next year, it slowly rose to my number 8 of all time. It's a game that also fits into the category of a game that I should be playing more often, but this one is a game that I play multiplayer only, and so again, I tried to lean more towards solo only for that. Vindication is my favorite Kickstarter game from all those I backed. Cthulhu Death May Die was a close second, a very close second, but ultimately Vindication wins out. It is clever, it is rewarding, it is light enough to be accessible, and deep enough to be intensely rewarding for the strategic choices you have. It has a ton of modules and expansion content that I don't even need or play with, but is available if I ever do actually play this game as much as it deserves to. It's such a good game. It's such a good game. Now, I did think of Unsettled as well, in case you're wondering. Unsettled, which I think is currently on Kickstarter when you watch this video, but Unsettled is another candidate for this, but I'm not ready to give Unsettled the crown just yet from all the other Kickstarter games that I've backed and love. Unsettled may get there. Give it time. But for right now, Vindication is my favorite Kickstarter game from all those I've backed. And that's it. 15 questions, 15 games, 15 different games, although I guess technically speaking, you're not under any commitment to choose different games. But let me know in the comments down below. I'll have these linked so you can just literally copy and paste as far as putting in your own stuff. And then as far as other channels, I said at the beginning of this video, I'm going to call out and nominate 3 other channels to go ahead and answer these 15 questions. I have no idea if they will or won't, but let's go ahead and do it. Number 1, we're going to do Board Game Ramblings. Board Game Ramblings, I'm going to go ahead, maybe I'll throw a link to this, to their videos and comment or something like that, I don't know. But Board Game Ramblings, if you want to answer these 15 questions. Thinker Themer as well, if you want to go ahead and dive into these. And then lastly, Board Game Hangover. Board Game Hangover, which is another channel I've talked about in the past, but if they want to go ahead and answer these. So Thinker Themer, Board Game Ramblings, and Board Game Hangover, which wasn't really planned, but is 3 different channels of duos, basically, groups of people who are doing it, so we'll see. But yeah, and maybe this will pass around from other people to other people, or maybe this will be a sad little end nomination that never turns into anything else. In any case, I had fun regardless of what happens. I just saw it going around social media, and I was like, I want to go into a bit more detail than just a social media post. And so I did this video instead. Until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co., and I hope you have a good one.